As an engineer, yes. And actually, I had parents asking me the same question at UCF, especially male parents. It is difficult. Sometimes I'm in meetings where I'm the only woman, and there are 100 guys. And that is not so bad, but when you go to the workplace, we communicate different. And you need to understand that female language is different than male language. Doesn't mean that when they come and scream in your office, doesn't mean that they're being disrespectful. They're guys, so they want to make sure you understand what they're saying. So you have to learn to work around those environmental challenges. When I go to a place to work, it usually takes me a year to convince the male of a species that I know what I'm talking about. I know about pumps, I know how they work, I know about pump definition, I know about power efficiency. They look at me when I start talking about that like, really? And sometimes they challenge you. And it's a little bit difficult. It's fun though, because this is what I do, and I'm teaching this to my baby engineer. When a guy comes to you and is upset because something is not working and starts screaming, the first thing that you have to do is chill. You have to listen. You have to learn. As a female, we're good on that. We listen, right? That's an asset on your job place. If you listen, try to see what is bugging this male and work around it. The answer may have to be split because, like I said, the communication is different. But they listen, and I know I have moved from different job places, and I always have the same comment from the guys. Migdalia, you're awesome. We like you. Don't go. Don't ever leave this place. So there are challenges because we communicate different. You have to learn not to take things personal. That's the thing. You have to go to the workplace. You have to understand it's difficult, not because it's a male or a female. It's just because we communicate different. And that is diversity. And actually, if you're coming from another country or I'm coming from an island, and I know that the male in my house were treated different than the female were treated. So that's diversity. You have to learn to work around diversity. It's not easy, but it's doable. And one of the things that I do, I try not to get mad. And if I get mad, I do this. I said, you know what? I disagree with you, and this is why. But I say it with a big smile. And usually the response is very good. They walk away, and we talk about that later, and you can go a long way. We're females, and I think that we have ways to talk.
You know, I haven't had any issues with my coworkers, thankfully. I've had more issues when dealing with the public, especially initially when I first started in my job, and less so maybe now, because generally when I'm on the phone, most people think I'm a man. So, but when I was a little younger and my voice was maybe more feminine sounding, before I moved back to here in Florida, I was working out in an office in Northern California, way up Northern California, out in the woods, fishermen and loggers. So very traditional, masculine, manly fields. And they're calling and asking about the weather. You know, they want to go out and make their money with the fishing, fishing for tuna and fishing for crabs out there. And they call, and this, young female's telling them that the weather's not going to be good. And they're like, what do you know what you're talking about? And I get a lot of flack for that. And sometimes very rude, sometimes very nasty. And my personal favorite incident was when this fisherman called, he telling me I don't know anything about the weather, and I told him he was welcome to go out anyway. I can't tell him what to do. I can only tell him what the weather's going to be doing. And then he asked to speak to my boss. And at that particular office, the boss was a female. And I told him he was more than welcome to speak to my female boss, and he hung up on me. And it just little incidents, mainly like that, where just people don't believe me because when I pick up the phone, because even when we're on the operational floor, we sometimes pick up the phone, especially at night when it's just the two of us on shift, and because I'm female, they're thinking they're talking to the secretary or the admin assistant, and I pick up the phone and, hello, well, can I speak to a meteorologist? And it's like, you're speaking to one. Can I speak to a real meteorologist? Well, the Florida Technology says that I have a degree in meteorology, so I'm who you're talking to. And just little incidents like that. One of the most poignant ones I remember was from when I was in college. And it actually didn't have to do with being female, it had to do with being African American, where one of my neighbors made some very disparaging comments about African Americans in science fields. And I just had to tell myself that I was probably more educated than he ever would be, and he would never understand anything that I was trying to tell him about anything. And I just had to walk away from that. But that was one of those sort of life-changing moments in my life, just on how to deal with essentially ignorant people who don't know you, who don't understand, and just make assumptions based on how you look, how you talk, or what gender you might identify with. So I guess that's been my experience. Thankfully, my coworkers are very cool.
Yeah, I think earlier in my career, definitely more prevalent than now. I started in the industry of building telephone systems and computers, and so it was very dominated by men who used to go out and install the poles and run the wires, and a lot of them didn't have college educations, but they knew the business, and so they had excelled and became bosses in my field. When we started converting from the old telephone systems to computers to run our telephone systems, they started hiring engineers out of college, and that was my first job. So coming in as a young girl with a college degree, working for men who never went to college and didn't have a degree was very difficult. But I worked harder. I just had to work harder and prove myself, and the defining moment for me is I was working on a telephone system that was down, and I was on the computer and I was debugging, and I was able to fix the problem, and my boss leaned back in his chair and he said, "You're finally one of the guys." Oh, wow. But you know, that was a huge compliment. That was the best compliment he could give to me at that point in time, right? So I knew I had arrived. And so you may have to work a little harder to prove yourself, but you can do it.
Yeah, I've been fairly lucky because I've always grown up as quote unquote one of the guys. I've always been a little bit tomboyish. I've always had more male friends than female friends, and really my biggest obstacle when I find myself in a new work environment, almost always surrounded by all men, is I basically have to convince them, don't worry about me. You don't have to walk around eggshells around me. You don't have to worry about hurting my feelings because I'm a female. You can talk about all the stuff you've always talked about in front of me. It's not going to faze me. And after a few weeks, I'm shocking them with the things that I say, and they let me in on the group. And I have encountered a similar situation where one of my fellow coworkers at my current office, when I got hired, he refused to believe that women can program. And I don't remember exactly what I did to prove myself, but he eventually decided, well, I still don't think women can program, but now I just don't think that you're a woman. So.
Oh, wow. So for me, yeah, I was a tomboy too. So I definitely got along with guys way better. But honestly, I have 5 brothers. I'm the only girl, so I had to survive my house, and that was way tougher than any job. But I think because I've always 5 brothers, and I'm number 5, so lots of older brothers. It wasn't something that I looked around the room and counted, so I never recognized that, like, in my engineering school, I was one of the few females around. I just didn't, because it wasn't a thing that I looked at. And when I started working, same thing, I didn't look at it because I was always the only female around, so it didn't bother me. But there was this one incident when, and I was told this was going to happen. When I was working with Johnson & Johnson, we were getting ready for our first trip to Japan and to start working on this new product. And I had just joined R&D then, and I was told that we usually don't send females to bring in new equipment, and we weren't bringing it to the States, we were bringing it to Europe. And I was told why. I was called and I was told why. It's like, there would be one VP, Japanese gentleman, that will refuse to talk to me, and they greet you and they bow, right? And we learn how to bow. And I was told that he will not look me in the eye, he will not talk to me, and he will not greet me. And I said, okay, that's fine. I'm just there to do my job, and I'm just gonna hear, I was a process engineer. I'm just there to do that and make sure the process works when we move it to Europe. So here we are on the production line, and it was very, very late at night, I remember, like 12 o'clock at night their time. And we were rushing to make sure we can get back on the train because the train stops running after a certain time. And he came out on the line to talk to us and to greet us, as that was the day we arrived in the country. And one of the tall male engineers that was with me, he's like, he met everybody, Ron, Michael-san, and Pamela-san, and he physically took the guy, because he's this big guy, he physically, literally took him, and he turned him around my direction. He goes, I want you to meet the person who's going to make the process work, because we were having a lot of problems with the process. I want you to meet the young lady who's going to make the process work. Her name is Pamela-san. And he had no choice. So he bowed, and I bowed. But at the end of that, we were there for 3 weeks. At the end of the 3 weeks, and they took us out to lots of dinners and lunches and breakfasts, what was he most impressed with? And it was really crazy. Everyone has problems using the chopsticks, and I didn't have a problem using the chopsticks. And apparently the way I learned how to use the chopsticks is a very traditional way of doing it, and I actually learned it from a Korean friend of mine in engineering school. And so he came up after this one dinner where they did not bring out any forks for anybody to use. So I was there literally. We had the European engineers with us, and they could not get the food off there. So I was like putting food into their plates, including my plates. And so he came over, and we were in the train going back to our hotel, and he came over. He goes, "Who taught you how to use chopsticks?" I'm like, I just learned it in college, but that for whatever reason, that made him completely started talking to me and talking personal stuff, which is not something they do at all. Started telling me about his elderly parents and his family and his commute. And so everyone was like wondering what's wrong, because he's talking to me too much now. So I had to tell them, it's like, he's just conversating with me. And he's like, he doesn't talk to people. He doesn't talk to us when we come here. He comes out one day to greet us. He goes out to one dinner with us, and then then he pretty much leaves. And he started talking to me. But that was like one incident that but I was warned about it. But it's still part of their culture that for such a technical job, it wasn't a place. And it is true, because when you look at the production, all the equipment that they were building for us, it was all male, and they all smoked on the line, because that was what they did. And so once they knew the Americans were coming, they had to build a barrier that the smoke wouldn't get on, because it's our work site for that period of time. But there were no females anywhere. There were females they would come and get our order for lunch, actually. There were females working, but they would not hire engineers at that location, female engineers. And then there was one other incident when I worked in Miami, and I think that was more cultural, actually. It's Miami with the Hispanic, it's a machismo thing, and so I was a female engineer hired on, and they weren't sure what I was supposed to come in and do, because they didn't know what a process engineer was supposed to come in and do. But what they brought me on to do is to bring products from research and development, which was in New Jersey, and bring it to the plant location in Miami. So we do the pilot study You send the product to the FDA to get approval, and once they approve the process, they come to edit you, to audit you at the site, and then they approve it whether you can make this product at the site. And so I would lead the development of the process of how the manufacturing will work. And when I would say, okay, so-and-so needs to get done, this equipment needs to get done, or whatever, people would not take my orders. They would wait for the plant manager to come. And so finally one day he came, he goes, I'm tired of having to repeat everything she says. Everything she writes on the email, just assume that that's what you have to do. And I didn't realize at the time it was happening, but it was happening. But it was, again, it was that I'm a female and I'm an engineer and I'm the only female engineer there, and they had to take orders, and it was male, mostly male, but they had to take orders from me. Why? But what I didn't know, all the females who worked the production line, and most of them were Spanish, Hispanic, Latinas, they were like quietly cheering me, and I didn't know that. And so finally some of them came up to me one day and they're like, are you okay? It's been your first week and we're so worried. Like we look in and all the conference rooms were glass, so they would see and they would realize that I was the only female in there, and am I okay? And then it dawned on me, I'm like, they're worried about me. I'm like, why are you worried? And apparently so many of them commented about it that HR actually came in to sit in on one of my meetings. So after the meeting, and I didn't think about it, I asked her, I'm like, oh, how come you wanted to come in? It was just like we were bringing a liquid product into the plant. She goes, well, I just wanted to make sure you're okay because I heard a lot of people talking about it. And I'm like, talking about what? But it was interesting that it didn't even faze me that that was a problem, because for me it wasn't. I've always been outnumbered. I have 5 brothers, and so I think that was tougher. But it does occur. It does still occur. I mean, yeah, you talk about it. But you just have to be pretty self-confident and know that you also went to the same schooling, and you did all the things too that other people are doing, and you do have that right, and you know, it's okay to assert that.